Hey guys, Graham, Truckerman reads. Friday, long route, bad day, don't care. No, I do care. Whatever. I finished reading The Camp of the Saints by Jean Raspail, recently translated into English and published by Vauban Books. This is a controversial book. I get why it's controversial, but after having read it, that's just a matter of one's individual values, and if you have allowed yourself to be programmed by $1 trillion of propaganda and the interests of the state, yes, you would deem it controversial. But if you're capable of actually understanding the question that it is asking you, maybe it will be less so. I'm going to couch it this way, and this is a book that if you've got wee ears in the room, you may want to pause and come back to this video when I describe it later. But let me start it off this way. When I was 16, I worked for Discount Tire in my hometown, and it's very repetitive work. You work with a lot of wrench swinging tire monkeys, and you just constantly lift a car up, pop the wheels off, either rotate them, repair a flat, replace them, whatever. It's just the same motions over and over and over again. And so you find ways to stay locked in, but pass the time interestingly. And one time I was in the flat repair station. There's room enough for two guys to work at the same time, with my buddy Rico. We called him Rico Suave because he was cool and he got chicks. And Rico he'd ask you questions to kind of needle you, but just to troll you and for his own laughs. And he knew that I was a goody two-shoes Boy Scout type, and he goes, "So Graham, would you hit a girl?" "No, Rico, I would not hit a girl." "Graham, what if she hit you first?" "It doesn't matter, Rico, she's a girl." He goes, "What if she was a lesbian?" It's immaterial, she's still a girl. He goes, "What if she was one of those big butch lesbians and she hit you first?" "Rico, I would still not hit her first." He goes, "What if a big butch lesbian came at you with a baseball bat and hit you first? Would you hit her back?" "Okay, yes, Rico, in that sense, I would probably defend myself and hit her back." And he goes, "You would hit a girl? That's messed up." He was one of those guys, but it was funnier when he did it. The Camp of the Saints is a lot like that. It is asking a question, and it's the kind of question where people won't reply with a yes or no or a direct answer. They will reply with a, well, maybe there's a circumstance. In fact, there's probably a circumstance in which the reality is not as the question is presented. And as the story unfolds, you realize that, no, this is the question that is being asked, and all of the other alternatives have been addressed and discarded, and the question is as plain as it is being presented. The question is this. Like I said, it came out in the 70s. The setting is France, but it really could be any developed Western country with a rich culture and history. There are two barges carrying close to 1 million third worlders for the purpose of the story there out of Kolkata. But these aren't just your regular downtrodden poor. These are people that are basically filthy savages. All right? They don't practice hygiene. They don't have social observances that the West would recognize. How do I couch all of this? Personal space, personal property, sexual decency, any of that stuff. It doesn't exist. They share very little in common with you culturally, but really all that they have in common is that they are the same species, and that is human beings. And they are leaving their poverty-stricken, trash-laden hellhole of whatever country they're coming out of, and they got on these barges, and they have openly declared that they are heading for a better and more developed world, and they're going to get there, and no matter what happens, they're going to stay there. And the whole world knows about this, and as, oh my gosh, freaking Death Star LEDs shining in my eyes here. And they're all doing everything they can to kind of play hot potato and not be the country that ends up getting stuck with these ships. They're oversized, crappy, rusted out barges that are basically about to sink. They are fit for a one-way trip. The passengers know this. The crew know this. and there's no ambiguity or innocence about what they are doing. They are going to arrive in some place, they are going to swarm the beaches, they are going to take whatever they want from what is there, and wherever they land is just going to have to deal with them. And so the developed world that knows that it's coming, they have to decide, are we going to stop this ship before it gets here? And if it does get here, what are we going to do to contain what will very quickly become a problem? Would you send a submarine out with torpedoes to sink this ship? Could you? If you sent an officer to do that, could he do it? If they couldn't, and these barges crash on your shore and immediately overwhelm your population with 1 million disease-laden, hungry people who are, simply by dint of how they act, going to destroy the world that you live in, would you send in the army to stop them, to contain them? Would you be able to reroute their ships somewhere else, give them material support to delay them? Like, what would you do? And if all other options fail, would you be able to do something otherwise deemed heinous to defend your home and your homeland and your home culture from being overwhelmed like this? It's a question that would have been very difficult to understand in the abstract even 10 years ago. But in the wake of the Arab Spring and the ISIS uprising and everything that happened in the Middle East that supposedly displaced entire villages and towns and small cities of people, we saw a lot of clusters of immigrants moving out of the Middle East and into Europe and being resettled as refugees. And I remember at the time in 2015 hearing stories about this, about how Angela Merkel over in Germany, with the consent and coordination of the EU, was dropping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Middle Eastern migrants into very small German towns and villages. One particular cluster of numbers that stood out to me was there was one village of about 170 people that suddenly had 700, it might have been Syrians or Iraqis dropped into it. And I thought, oh man, how are they going to house them, and how long is it going to be before they get sent back, and do they have the resources to sustain them? And then before long I realized the plan is not for them to go back. That town was effectively wiped out. It went from being a German town to being a majority Muslim town overnight. One of the most chilling lines that gets a lot of playtime in quotes from the Camp of the Saints is, your world has no meaning to them. They will build a fire with your beautiful oak door. They will be tired. They will be hungry. They will wipe themselves with the pages of your fine literature. I mean, for the sake of the book, there's a place that they come from that is named, but that's just a placeholder. I mean, they're coming out of Calcutta and they're going to land in France, but in the end, it's two cultures that are going to try to occupy the same space at the same time, and one of them is extremely base and will not be civilized, and the other is standing on the shoulders of thousands of years of refinement and civilization. But with the fear of being called racist, they hesitate to defend what it is they have and that they have inherited, even knowing that it will be completely obliterated as it fails to absorb this influx of these two barges. It's a chilling story to think about, and made all the more so because we have seen it happen in pockets in the developed Western world. There are entire countries that are having problems with this right now in Europe. There's the aforementioned problems in Germany. France is dealing with crippling issues like this. Look at what's going on in the UK and in Scotland, Pakistani grooming gangs. Not only is the problem going on, you get in trouble for addressing it. You could have a fully grown man try to rape a 12-year-old girl. He'll get 6 months, maybe, but a parent who complains about it on Facebook will get 2 years for racism posting. This is the world that we're in right now. That's what makes this an especially timely and relevant question to ask. And much like my old buddy Rico hammering you with what if, and chipping away all the alternative branches that could veer away from the main thrust of the question is that if it comes down to, will you with firepower defend your civilization from this thing that will not be steered away, could you do it? It's a very hard question to answer, but you have to consider the cost in order to give the qualified and right answer. I have my own externalities that I would want to consider. Much of it contingent upon the tenets of my faith. And I'm sure your relationship with your faith would have some bearing on what your answer would be to this question. This is something that we're seeing play out. I talked about this earlier this week in Minnesota. Some story just dropped today from Chris Rufo and from a guy named Lomez online that they exposed about $1 billion of fraud that the Somali population of Minnesota committed against the taxpayers of Minnesota and Minneapolis. $1 billion of fraud. They just take it, send it out of the country under the auspices of we're setting up autistic daycare for adults and for children, and we got this charity and that charity, and we're going to get this money from the taxpayer. And you pull at the thread of the tapestry and you unravel it, and all you're finding is a mailbox in front of a warehouse, and there's no actual business there. They're just collecting money and harvesting from it, and this is allowed to go on because you can't audit these subsets of people that live in the developed Western world, or else you're a racist, or you're fill in the blank phobic. And the natural consequence of this going on is that you're eventually going to get a large enough number of people that don't care about being called those things and may even openly embrace them in the name of saving their civilization from being replaced unto annihilation. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got places like Martha's Vineyard in 2022, that the first time that they got a taste of the policies that they advocate for, these elite coastal blue blood types who are totally fine with open borders because, hey, the massive waves of migrants are only going to end up in those border states, and I get points for being charitable for espousing these values, but I don't have to deal with the consequences of those values. Well, some red state governors decided to start sending, it wasn't even 50 of them, some of those migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and said, hey, yeah, there's plenty of room there. There's wealthy people there. They can help you out there. The wealthy liberals in Martha's Vineyard had those people off of their island in 48 hours. And the story got memory hold. Only one side of the spectrum even remembers it, and the news will not ever acknowledge it. They are rich enough to avoid the consequences of their values, which they demand that you pay for. But what if those barges crashed on Martha's Vineyard and they didn't have the wherewithal to repel 800,000 demanding, needy mouths who had no frame of reference for valuing their culture and their possessions? Then what? What would their answer be when they cannot escape the question? That is what the Camp of the Saints demands of the reader. It is an intense read, it is harrowing, and at the same time, it is compelling. Content warning, severe language, sexual content, things of the sort. Nevertheless, I would recommend it with those qualifications. This is a book that would also merit intense levels of discussion, and I could see myself reading it again down the road with an eye to that. So, holy crap, I doubt that I'll be giving this like a best of year designation, but it is one of the best books that I have read this year. It's just, it's not that I, felt good reading it, but it had something very real to say, and it had a demand to make of the reader. On those grounds, I think you should check it out. Drive safe. See you out there.